Hey, what's up? This is Jake here in Jake's shop. I'm going to go ahead and do a video just on block sanding primer. This is actually the third and final block. I talked about it in the previous videos. A couple tips on actually block sanding this panel or panels like this that I've learned through the past, and also recent tips gotten from a buddy who's been in this quite a bit. So we'll go into that. First, we'll just start talking about the blocks. So the blocks, there's a lot to blocks. You can buy tons of different types of blocks. A lot of it has to do with how rigid they are. This one's not very flexible. You can obviously see the length that it is. And then you've got something like this, who obviously is a lot longer, but you can actually distort it slightly, right? This is one of my favorite blocks as of recent times. I've never had the opportunity to use one until recently, and this is what one of my good friends who does bodywork turned me on to. This is great, especially for a lot of the panels on this car. These old muscle cars, everything's rolling, right? This panel looks flat, but it's flat, but it's rolling this way and it's rolling this way, rolling this way, rolling this way. This block, I can get on here and I can actually flex it, just slightly. And that, it still stays flat, but I can automatically, it will contour to the shape of this panel with just a little bit of twisting in my hands. It takes practice to do that. A lot of what will happen is you'll either wear you'll contest it as you're blocking, going in an X pattern. You'll actually be able to feel the sandpaper after you've done a little bit. And if you're wearing it out here and wearing it out here, that means you're probably putting too much bow in it. You're not getting the center used up. Same token, if you're not putting enough pressure on it, you're going to use the center of it out more, right? So that's something that where it's going to take kind of time and finesse. You're not pushing very hard on these panels when you're blocking them out. You almost don't need any pressure. The weight of your arms, the weight of your hands on it is almost perfect, and then kind of go from there. And then if you've got more rounded panels, you might put a little bit of twist on that block. At least that's what I've been noticing with this particular block. In the past, these DuraBlocks are really good, but you'd have to keep changing them to different types, and there's no real flex in it at all, so it's hard to contour the panel, so it's just like you're blocking the whole panel with a short block like this. This block is a great block, especially for your initial primes. Your initial primes with a smaller block like this, no problem, but when you're on your final block, you want this thing flat. You can be able to sand out a little low spot here, and there might be a high spot here, and you can sand it out, but the point between those 2 points might be low. You need something flat to catch all those potential lows when you're going to this type of a level on a car. So final block, what I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and do a time lapse of how I'm doing it. You can see I've got this panel raised off of the car because it's attached to the car. That way I can get off of the edge. I can sand off of the edges of the panel without distorting anything or stopping short of it. That way I got that nice flat area to work in. Okay, I wanted to go ahead and change the angle just to show you a little bit about what some of these next steps are in blocking this panel for the final block. Before I go into time-lapse mode, I'll actually do some of it here. So I did want to show a couple other cool little tricks of the trade, or little tricks that I've recently found that have been really helpful. Besides the block I was just talking about that I'll be using for my final block, I'm also going to go ahead and use a guide coat. Now, a lot of guide coats are, guys grab rattle cans, flat black rattle cans of primer or whatever, or just whatever you have on the Krylon on the shelf. I've used this stuff recently that came from the auto body shop. It was not cheap, but I'm going to go ahead and use it. This is a product, 3M just makes a lot of really good stuff. This is 3M's dry coat, right? Dry guide coat. Part number, 051131-05860. That's in bold there. Anyways, I've been using this a lot on these final panels. What's really nice about this I've found is a couple things. One, it lasts forever. It's not cheap. It's like $45-50, I think, just for the kit. And this is like charcoal, I think, or carbon. And what it's doing, you just use a little bit of it. It's just powder, right? And just rub the whole panel. Like just that little bit, that's like probably more than I need. And then just rubbing the panel with it real quick. One is I don't need to worry about paint drying. If I used a cheap rattle can for something like this, you got to wait for it to dry for a minute, and it'll gum up your paper. So many things if you're not a professional that does this every day, and you've got like vacuum set up to suck all the dust out of your sander as you're using it when you're dry sanding. You're doing everything to just keep the paper from clogging up most times. So I do a dry coat like that. It's done. It's ready to be sanded. Again, it lasts forever. Like this would probably last, I don't know, dozens of cars worth. And you can, and then if you do more than one car ever, like I'll probably keep this the rest of my life. But if you were doing this for a living, you can just buy the refill bottoms, and I don't know what it is, 20, 30 bucks, whatever. So anyways, dry coat, really nice. It just kind of, it's gonna just darken it up. You know, the one thing about this 2K primer I've noticed at my first few initial blocks on it, you can actually see where the lows and highs are, just because when you cut through that initial layer, they'll be lighter, and then the spots you haven't hit will be darker. This just darkens it up just a little bit more, so they're easier to see while you're sanding. And I'll usually do this a couple times. Like for right now, I'm going to show you what the initial block looks like. I'm not going to do the whole panel without a mask on and the fans on. I'm just going to kind of show the idea of it. Now, final blocking on a big flat panel like this, you're not necessarily working little areas. You're working the whole thing. And so it'll go something like this. You can see I'm working it all the same direction. I'm not going super fast, and I'm not pushing super hard. I've got a little teeny bit of bow in it. Coming out to the edges. Now you can see I've raised this panel up off the car a little bit, and that allows me to take my block to the edge of the panel, right? Off the edge of the panel, off the edge of the panel. And I'm not trying to go down. You know, I don't want to create I don't want to create this set off that direction, but I do want to get it off the panel. I don't know if you're going to see this in the screen or not. And you can see long strokes, just back and forth, I'm doing the whole panel. Again, I'll come back this direction. Now this is 180. I'm not trying to go very far with 180s. Same thing. See, I cut it the other direction. You can already see, I'm hoping you can. If you can't see, I'll check. We'll zoom in and I'll show you where there's a low, which will be sanded out in a heartbeat. A few more strokes and I'm done. So we'll flip the camera around and see if we can see this in here. Okay. Now you can see the guide coat, and you can see this slight low spot here, right? Focus in real nice there. You can see the dust here, but that's just a slight low. You can already see some of the sanding scratches coming through. A few more strokes and that thing's leveled out. Those are the types of things you're working on. You know, these edges, you can see there's still darks. You can see where I worked it back here, a little lighter, a little darker. These are things that, you know, like a normal car would have all day long. A show car wouldn't. You know, this could look like a wow in your paint before. So I'll keep sanding this down until a lot of this dark stuff comes out. Again, just hitting it with 180 right now real briefly. You can see this is the other area that I've guide coated with that charcoal, and it's still there. So we'll go ahead and set up a little timeline. Oh, one other quick trick or thing that I made here recently. Put the camera back here. And that I'm pretty excited about is this. So when my buddy came over to kind of check my car out and say, hey, just do a whole nother prime coat, let's fix a couple things, you're good, sort of a thing. That's the quick version of it anyways. I made something to hold paper. This is out of scrap metal I had laying around the shop. You know, I had these rolls, and since I wasn't an auto body guy for a living or anything, it's not like I went and bought one of those fancy sandpaper holders. I just had rolls laying around the shop, and I was done with that. He's like, dude, just make something to hold the roll. So this is heavy. It's just a piece of 5/8 all thread, a couple pieces of steel quarter-inch angle, you know, 1.5 by 1.5 by quarter-inch angle, and a piece of 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 tube steel. Welded it up, and it's got nice weight to it. I threw a little handle on it. That way I can set it on things, and I can just pull the paper off and rip it really quickly. It's been a time saver. I'm loving it. Obviously, don't put it on your cars and your body panels, but setting it off to the side, and you know, holds only 2 or 3 rolls, which at any given time, that's really all I'm working with. You know, on this particular level, I'll be doing 180, 220. That's pretty much it. I can put a third roll, my 400 grit on there for later, but I may end up wet sanding that anyways. So I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. It's always fun to have little stuff around the shop, and then when you make something like that, it's really handy. So, okay, let's continue on. We'll hit this with 180 now. You're going to see me using this brush. This brush is very clean. There's no oil on it. It's really just for dust, and it's really just to clean the bottom of the block off. When I'm doing this really small panel like this, I'm not as worried, but if you're doing a lot of sanding, just constantly trying to keep that clean and get the excess off of the panel. Well, let's do some blocking and see what she starts looking like. Okay, so now I'll put the camera around. You can see what's going on here. That was 180. That's done with 180. I'm going to go to 220 next. I'm going to go ahead and guide coat it again just because I have it. It's easy. It's pretty quick and clean before I go to 220. But we'll zoom in. I'll show you a couple little spots I'm still seeing. They'll need a slight bit of attention with a little more sanding, and we'll be good to go. All right, let's take a look. A little more sanding. Man, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. Right in here is still, there we go, still low. I mean, you can't, I don't even know if I can feel it. When you're feeling a panel, the other thing I've recently learned, when you're on top of the panel, it's harder to feel. Like, there's no way I could feel that. No way I can feel that. But if I come down at an angle and see my arm stretched out flat, and I go back and forth with the panel, well, I still can't feel that one. It's not low enough. But what I'm saying is if there was one, you'd probably be able to feel. It's probably not on the final block. They're more about eyesight at this point. Until there's clear coat on a car and a base on the car, you'll never see a wow. And what I mean by a wow isn't a dent. It's a wow. At least that's what the pros call it. And a wow is like when you're looking at a car's flat panel, like this is a nice flat panel. The sun hits the clear coat, or if like the reflection of a light on this panel hit the clear coat, like if I wetted it down with wax and grease, it'd be really shiny. You're seeing the reflection of the lights. They'll be coming along and it looks even. All of a sudden it goes, vroom, vroom. You'll see them. That's the only way you can see them. To eliminate those, this is the level we go to here. So you can see that's a slight low spot. I don't know if I can get close enough. Maybe. Let me see this. You can see the sanding scratches. They're coming through it already. So that means that 220 is going to cut right through it. And it'll be right there. Let's see if I see any more here. Going right there. See, it's just barely low. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to 220 and kill the rest of those low spots on this panel. The edges I'm not as concerned with. Obviously you saw me probably in the video there just previously, the clip, working the edges a little bit shorter stroking it. I'm not as worried right now with the edges. I can always touch those up with a smaller block and whatnot, especially these lower lips and stuff. I'm not going to use that big block for that. That's just going to be quickly sanded nice and flat. Obviously I've already eliminated all the dents and any other major imperfections in that. There's also a wing that goes over this whole back half of the car. So, if there's like this low spot here, I can't feel like with my finger that it's low, but you can see it in the paint and the primer. So I'll sand it a little bit more, but there's a wing over it on top of it all, so I'm not going to mess with it. That's probably a dent from the wing when it was previously put on there. All right, let's do a little final block. Go from there. Okay, so got it all sanded down to 220. Basically all that's left to do now is just touch up these edges a little bit. I'll probably use a different block for that. You know, sometimes depend on the edge on what I'm doing. I might try the smaller block, Durablock or something like that. Just get in with a 220 and just kind of try and make sure those edges are all dialed in as we go. You know, this is the type of stuff where if that bigger block sometimes becomes a hassle. Now, the other thing I didn't really talk to you about before was on that bigger block, you know, I'm pretty much just on the main flat portion of the panel trying to work myself off the edge. When you get into the smaller blocks, it's kind of the same idea, but you're just working them in the same, you know, flat pattern, just kind of rest them on the edge and work with the direction of the panel and the flattest surface. Like, for example, this block, I wouldn't want to turn it on its edge like this necessarily and completely block like that. You can, but I kind of want to keep it level with the flattest plane. Now, if this panel's flatter this way than it is this way, then I do want to put it this way. So it kind of depends on the panel and what you're trying to do. You know, there's more roll on the panel this way actually right now than there is this way, so I'd probably do it this way. And just stay on this very edge, just block it. You know, and this is where the finesse and like the really, really good pros are, right? This is where they know just by feel and look what's going on here. And they can kind of tell, you know, okay, this is the best way to position the block, and this is the type of block, stuff like that. So these Durablocks have been good. I've actually went ahead and cut down Durablocks before as well. There's like, you know, I haven't seen a Durablock that long yet. They probably make one, but I've got some that are that long and some that are that long. So this one's been whacked off a little shorter. This block's actually kind of nice too. This is actually not my block, but I've been using it lately a lot. It's a motor guard block, and it's the same token. It's a little bit more flexible, but it stays flat. You know, it's a version of a soft block, whereas this is a motor guard block as well, and it's super, super, super soft. This block I'd really only use in, like, you know, wheel well crevices or other types of real round crevices where I need to get into that crevice. The other good thing about this is really good for is like on your final block or your final sand when you're dealing with like 400 grit, you don't need something super, you know, stiff. You could use this as long as you're not digging it with your fingers. You could use this and do your final block with a soft block with 400 in most cases. On the main flat panels, I might stick to something maybe a little more longer, but you know, a lot of that, it's just all preference and feel. You know, everyone's got their own preferences and their own feel. So, you know, throughout this process, you're going to see exactly what I'm doing with these blocks and what this car looks like when I'm done. Then you can decide what works and what doesn't. I know this for sure. There's a million different things you can do, and a lot of them will work. So just do a lot of research like I have, and pick what works best for you. You know, what you're most comfortable doing, and go from there. So we'll flip the camera around. We'll see what I did here with the 220 and what it looks like when the panel's pretty much ready to rock for some 400, except obviously the edge work, which I won't bother videotaping. Okay, so if you've made it this long through the video, here's where we're at. I kept focusing on the spot that was in here, and there's nothing. Sanded right out. There was another spot on this panel. Now again, this spot you can obviously see is still low. I can't feel it. It feels a little rough, but it doesn't necessarily feel low. And I'm not going to, I mean, I'll sand that out, but I'm not going to be too picky, again, because the wing covers all of this. And you wouldn't see that even if it was just painted. You couldn't see that unless the sun hit it, and then you watch the clear coat. I do probably do that. But again, there's a wing there, so I'm not too worried about it. And again, there was another spot right here. It's gone. So yeah, I've been having good luck with that 2K primer. It has taken 3 primes, but I'm understanding now, I'm talking to professionals that do custom cars for a living, that 3 primes are what people need anyways to do a car to this caliper. So that's learning for me. I didn't realize that. I've always just done 2, and they've turned out okay, but I've never done a 3rd, and then, you know, now I'm looking at how much of perfection some of these different car guys can be, and how amazing these builds can really be. You know, this car is going to be somewhere in between amazing and badass, I think, when we're done here. So it'll be interesting to see. The sanding scratches, when I zoomed in, they're really hard to see. You can see them on the panel. Again, they're 220 scratches. There's guys that'll actually just sand to 220, and depending on the color, sometimes that can be hidden when you put a good sealer coat in it. I'm going one step further. The sealer I'm using on this says 400, and a lot of that's just because the main panels on a car that you see all the time right in front of you, 400, is going to ensure that once you seal it, you don't see any scratches. Door jams, 220 is plenty. A lot of guys will even do 180 in a door jam and spray it, because again, you're not really staring at the jams. You know, big flat panels, you can see a lot. You can see this big mirror in front of you. You're basically making a mirror out of paint, right? So that's the goal. Update on the car, I'll probably do another update soon. When this video posts online, I would have done a lot more work to this car. I've just got this last sand, you know, all the main work. This is the first panel I'm getting down to paint ready for the second time now, before I move on to the rest of the car. All the other panels are primed, completely primed. I shouldn't have to, knock on some wood somewhere, get the primer out again on this particular car. We'll see, but that's my hope and hopefully dream. I've shot over 2.5 gallons of primer total on this car. When I say primer, I've used a lot of that 2K primer as also a sealer, a wet-on sealer for like when I did the undercarriage and when I did the interior of the car. That's part of the reason I've used so dang much of it. And it's probably not 2.5. It's probably more like 2, because I used some primer on some other projects. But anyways, yeah, it's been good. Hey, if you like this video at all, hit like and subscribe. If you got any ideas or things to point out, I'm always learning something here, and as I learn stuff, I'll throw it up on the YouTube there for other people to take a look at, and my kids to look at, and fun stuff like that. So hey, hopefully we'll see you on the next one. If you like it all, hit like and subscribe. Thanks.